Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Okay, great. Glad you can hear me. Good
Yes.
afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the PICTA and CEDA Eastern Cape live webinar. My name is Amina Koza. By profession, I'm an account executive working for Oracle. I'm also the member of the women chapter of PICTA, as I act as the deputy chairperson of PICTA. I'd like to take this opportunity to welcome everyone that's taken the time out of their busy schedule to join us in today's session. The theme, the name of our session is Localization, the most suitable economic recovery strategy for growth and prosperity. I'd like to take a moment and just take you through the ground rules in terms of how we engage in the webinar. When you look at the bottom of your screen, kindly unmute yourself if you are not currently speaking. We'd like to also encourage you, just click on the microphone button. We'd like to encourage all participants to please switch on your videos. You can just do that by clicking on the video. If you want to see who the other participants are, you can see, I think we're currently at 25 participants. Please throw in your questions on the Q&A on the poll, as well as you can use the chat to communicate directly with the panel that's available, or to just communicate with everyone that is sitting here and joining the session. This session is recorded and may be shared publicly on YouTube platforms and other social media platforms. So we just wanted to let you know that that will happen. Before we start, I'd like to set a tone with a write-up that was shared to me by the PICTA team in terms of what their thoughts are. And based on that, we will then move on to look at what the agenda has set out for us, and then speak to who the main speakers are. Rufaro, I'll come back to the agenda. I'd like to just firstly set the tone with a write-up from PICTA. So the PICTA's perspective is that localization is an essential decentralization and economy shifting activity that allows for the economic activity to shift into hands of millions of small and mid-sized businesses instead of concentrating in fewer mega corporations, whether they are local or global organizations. Localization means that communities would become more self-reliant, striking a balance between trade and local production by diversifying economic activity and shortening the distance between the producers and the consumers wherever possible. However, this does not mean we're retreating or retracting into isolation. Global cooperation or global participation is vitally needed in order to create governance structures that enable local, national, and international authorities to determine the rules of engagement for business, rather than allowing just big business to dictate to government. It's not about eliminating all forms of trade either. Communities still can export surpluses once local needs are met, and they can still import goods that cannot be produced locally. As we often say, there is no single blueprint for localization. The question is, do we have it in South Africa? And the answer is yes. But the question is, do people in local communities understand this and understand the policies that set out this localization? I'd like to take you through and down an imaginary lane and say, let's imagine most of your food farmers who are part of your community and who ensure food security all year round. Imagine children being free to play and explore their world safely under the watch of neighbors whom you know and trust. Imagine the money you spend on everyday goods continuing to circulate in the local economy, building the community wealth along the way. Imagine local business multiplying and providing ample, meaningful employment opportunities, instead of your hard-earned cash being immediately siphoned off to some distant corporate headquarters or headquarters across the globe, where economic localization can make these visions, economic localization can make these visions a reality. I would like to invite you today to engage with our panel and have this discussion. We will start off with different presentation from the various speakers whom I will introduce as soon as we've gone through the agenda. And then we will then take off. Rufaro, can you please put the agenda back on? So we've covered the welcome. In the agenda, we've got Mr. Sonwabo Mdaba, who will take us through the PACTA update, and Mr. Thabo Shanxene, who will take us through the automotive industry from the Automotive Development in Industry Center, who will take us through a presentation that will give us an appreciation of what they are doing there. We've also got Mr. Don Mashele, Head of Development Impact Support at Small Enterprise Finance Agency. And we've also got Mzwanele Manani, the Director for Value Chain Support for Development of Small Business, from the Department of Small Business Development. He will take us through the market value chains in the Department of Small Business Development. We will then switch off to a roundtable where we'll have the panel in discussion, and we will pick up some of the questions coming out of the Q&A that you will send to us. And thereafter, we will go to further questions and answers once we've closed the panel discussion. And Mr. Mdaba will then give us again just the way forward in terms of what to expect following that. And then we will then close off the session promptly at 4:30. Just to get started, I'd like to hand over the conversation to you, Mr. Sonwabo Mdaba, to take us through the PACTA update.
Can I please project some slides? While I'm projecting, there's Funzani, who's also going to present in the beginning. She will be the last presenter of the speakers. Okay, I'm going to have a quick rundown of who PACTA is, just to give us an understanding what we do as an organization. Okay, as an introduction to PACTA, basically PACTA, which is for Pan-African Information Communication Technology Association, was formed in July 2020 during the COVID lockdown, in a bid to become a digital transformative organization geared towards advancing the ICT pursuance of African small to medium enterprises, or better known as SMMEs, youth, women, and persons with disabilities, through the facilitation and encouragement of an inclusive ecosystem that is conducive to economic growth. Because ICT cuts across all other sectors, so we engage with all other sectors, which is why we've partnered with organizations like SIDA that deal with all sectors, SMMEs. Going forward, PACTA was created basically in response to a critical need to address challenges faced by ICT SMMEs, youth, women, people with disabilities, and we can all agree that women are still battling to get into the ICT environment. Youth is the future, so we believe that youth should be empowered and need to be enabled. People with disabilities, it's very important that this environment and transformation must be inclusive. So we focus on people with disabilities, as well as the greater communities in Africa, Africa being South Africa being included, which is why we're here today and we're looking at Eastern Cape. These matters include absence of conducive environment for innovation and development and sustainability, digital innovation, digital divide and inequalities. These were amplified, I'm sure we all agree, during the COVID epidemic when it first broke out last year, and the 4IR basically disruption in the industry. Digital exclusion, communities in the rural and peri-rural or peri-urban areas, children there and people there still are excluded in this environment. They can access the internet or do whatever they have to do, activities on their cell phones, but real internet connectivity for broadening up their understanding and their knowledge, they are still excluded because of speed and connectivity issues. Gender inequality is still prevalent. Access to resources such as R&D, they don't have access to R&D. PALTA has partnered with numerous institutions like CSIR, University of Forte, University of Walter Sisulu, and the list continues for us to have a broad access to R&D, for us to make a difference to the different communities, especially rural and peri-rural. Tech education is still a challenge in South Africa and the rest of Africa. South Africa is not unique. So we need to attend to this. And I know our government is really working very hard in getting to address the technical education. PALTA advocates for integrated digital continent with a quest inspired by the spirit of Pan-Africanism, focusing on the inclusion as well as economic inspiration of women, the youth, and persons with disabilities in the digital era. It is motivated by development based on the self-reliance and self-determination of the African child being part of the digital transformation. This is critical. We've got what makes PALTA function every day. We've got an executive core team. It's myself, which is Sonabo Mdaba, is the president. We've got Professor Norbert Jere, is with the University of Walter Sisulu. Stella Vuma she's with the University of Johannesburg. Shwama Hamunyela, doctor, she's with Namibia University of Technology and Science. Dombo Vuyo Wai Mgwebi, she is the dean, or she was the dean of administration until yesterday at University of Forte. Now she is at the University of Mpumalanga. There was an error in updating the slide. Prof. Tembisa Ngondi, she is the Dean of Faculty of Informatics and Design at Cape Peninsula University of Technology. We've got Lulama, who looks at marketing strategy. We've got Dr. Ali Kamundani, is with United Nations University Institute in Mackay. And Dr. Solomon Gizau Tulu is at Addis Ababa University. Dr. Solomon actually looks at COMESA block for PALTA and advises us on how to deal and localize in that environment. Then we've got Mr. Dennis Darrell, who is Executive Corporate Affairs. Our vision in PALTA is to create an integrated and inclusive digital society and economy in Africa that improves the quality of life of Africa's citizens through enhanced communities, technology, innovation, and digital transformation. Our mission is to champion for enabling environment for Africa digital innovation, IP commercialization, digital transformation, and economic emancipation. A unified voice advocating Africa's socio-economic development and sustainability. While fostering the digital inclusion, there is the youth, women, persons with disabilities, and the rest of the communities in the rural and peri-rural, not excluding the urban areas, collaboration and increased cooperation in the ICT digital ecosystem. Our mandate, PALTA, is an organization whose mandate purpose seeks to act as a digital transformative body in the interest of communities. ICT hubs, where we contribute in, we work with an ICT hub at Gqeberha, Nelson Mandela ICT hub. Then we work with another ICT hub that is based in Zimbabwe, and we are forging ahead and creating partnerships and working and hopefully create our own ICT hub very soon. SMME development and sustainability, women, youth, persons with disabilities. The strategic objectives are very clear. We've got 4 objectives. We want to be a catalyst for the inclusion of rural and peri-rural communities by creating of an enabling developmental ecosystem, bridging Africa digital divide, accelerate Africa digital transformation access. Creation of innovation factory, training, skilling, upskilling, reskilling of individuals from communities, connectivity, provide guidance on internet access, digital infrastructure, devices, while promoting digital culture in communities. And promoting digital culture, we do a lot of webinars as PICTA. Since PICTA's formation, we've done over 13 webinars, including this one will be number 14. We do some of them, we do them online on IP radio station, and we broadcast live in the whole continent and the rest of the world. Develop platforms that provide information and market access opportunities, and to establish community challenges, current local level survival strategies, available resources, and community skills. This we do by engaging with communities, and PICTA is able, through its broad knowledge base with advisors that make up of doctors, about 9 doctors and 3 professors, we are able to offer that guidance. PICTA has got chapters, Women in Digital Era, which is wide, and Youth in Digital Era, which is wide. This is led, all of them, the assistant or deputy chairperson is Amina for wide, and for YIDE is Resuna, who is based in Johannesburg as well, Institute of Technology and Science. The Institute of Technology and Science is an institute that we've created within PICTA. We've partnered with Cisco. We are a Cisco certified academy where we offer Cisco certified courses. Right now, we are offering courses to children in Northern Cape. We're offering courses in children in Namibia, Zimbabwe, Ethiopia, and some children in Eastern Cape. We've got a few that have enrolled. And the enrollment is continuing, and we're observing and we're pushing that it must happen. And through the iHub that we partner with, we are rolling out a program for the incubatees in George and in Port Elizabeth on Cisco courses on cybersecurity, Python, and C++, and the rest of the courses. These are our present partners that we have, that we've projected here. There's 1 or 2. There's an organization based in the EU, which is not here. The logo is not here. And we've got Addis Ababa University at the bottom, and the others are coming online, including Namibia University of Technology. And I thank you. Back to you, Amina.
Thank you, Mr. Mdwaba, for a comprehensive overview of what Pan-African Information Communication and Technology Association stands for, who are its partners, and what other chapters are there. If anyone is interested, we will post a link on the chat if you would like to join as a member of either WIDE or YIDE. Please, you're welcome to join and register. As a member, we're bringing a lot of various opportunities back to our communities, spread it far and wide across the continent. We're not only just South Africa focused, we're focusing on the entire continent. So Mr. Mdwaba will post a link for you to just register and become a member and bring some your expertise and input. We welcome that. So tackling the first conversation in our agenda, I would like to ask Mr. Thabo Shenxane. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Mr. Thabo Shenxane is a CEO at Automotive Industry Development Center. We've specifically invited him to talk to us about why localization is important, the socio-economic impact of localization on local GDP, the importance of manufacturing local indigenous products that we can make as OEMs. And also, you know, we in the middle of a pandemic and we on the third wave. Some of us have had firsthand experience, or we know someone, or we know a relative, or we've even lost a relative to COVID-19. It's not even a foreign subject. What's the future there? Is localization strategy as an economic recovery tool? We look forward to hear what your thoughts are, Mr. Shenxane, and I'll hand over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Is my screen available to everyone?
Yes, it is. I think if you can just put your presentation on presentation mode, it will be great. Thank you.
Where is the presentation mode?
On top. No, move your cursor. Yeah, animation slideshow.
There we go.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Chairperson. Thank you for pronouncing my surname correctly the second time around. My name is Thabo Shenxane. I am from the Automotive Industry Development Center in the Eastern Cape. We are a provincial government entity whose main mandate is to assist the automotive industry in the Eastern Cape remain as the key investors here, whose main task is to assist the government of the Eastern Cape to prioritize challenges that are faced by the automotive industry. I think first of all, Chairperson, let me appreciate the invitation. Thank you very much for inviting us, and we're hoping that what we will share today will be useful to the topic at hand. Secondly, I appreciate that we are in partnership with SEDA on a very important subject matter that seeks to assist our entrepreneurs to be available to localization and transformation opportunities in the automotive sector. So SEDA is our key partner there. Chairperson, I'm also glad to see that Mr. Memani is online. Where he sits at the DTI, they are very key on guiding the policy framework on localization. And our task in that framework is to deal specifically with the automotive industry and matters of localization and transformation in the sector. Mr. Don Mashele and I as well go a long way. Those are key partners that are key in implementing these issues. Chairperson, my presentation is going to cover the 7 topics. And I must also disclaim now that we in the Eastern Cape, together with the forum, have recently completed a study, probably the only one in the country, I dare say, that looks at the constraints of localization and transformation in the automotive industry. We have not even launched this study yet, so this platform is getting it hot from the oven. Chairperson, also at 4 o'clock I will have to leave, but I've got one of my colleagues online, who's Anelis Kosana, who might be able to take a few questions. But if there are pressing matters, please do request the people that are online to send us questions, and then we will attempt to reply to them at a later stage. Let me go into the presentation, Chair. I think our work in the automotive industry, as most people online would know, that it is guided by an automotive sector master plan. We call it South African Automotive Master Plan, Vision 2035, whose main objective is to, number one, to make sure that South Africa becomes a global player in terms of vehicle production. Currently, we account for about 6.64% of the global vehicle production. We want to move that to 1%, and that becomes a yardstick to play in the global space as one of the leaders in the automotive industry. Secondly, we want to increase what we call local content, which is exactly the subject matter today. We're currently sitting at 39% local content across all the tiers within the automotive industry value chain. And the target is to move that 39% to 60% of local content. And by default, Chairperson, if we can successfully do that, we will be able to increase the production, the manufacturing capability in our province, in our country, and also be able to create new jobs and new industries by default. And that also runs way smack into the skills development area as well. Objective number 3, Chair, is to move the current employment target, which is sitting at about 122,000 people employed by the sector, to 224,000. And that's a significant jump we're looking at. And we will never be able to achieve that without localization, as it were, and transformation. Also, the competitiveness of our suppliers is an ever-moving target, Chair, and we really need to make sure that our suppliers themselves are able to comply with industry standards and world standards in the automotive industry. We will talk more about this as we go along. Industry transformation I've already mentioned, and increased in value chain I've already mentioned. So those objectives are underpinned by the 6 pillars. And as you can see, localization is at the center of all of this. It's pillar number 3. But we also have to drive local market optimization, increase the value of production, the cars that are produced in the country to be consumed locally. Number 2, we're chasing the ever increasing market in the continent to be able to export some of our vehicles into the continent. Localization is today's topic. Infrastructure development in the form of both utilities infrastructure and logistics infrastructure. As you would know, and I think there's a big problem in the country of deteriorating infrastructure, both on the logistics side and on the utility side. Nelson Mandela Bay currently is sitting on 11% wet water resources. And we cannot have investors staying in areas where there's poor infrastructure management or deteriorating infrastructure. Industry transformation, we've touched on it. Technology and skills is the 6th pillar. So in the whole, or in the main, this is the master plan that is driving the automotive industry in South Africa. By 2035, those are the targets that are set. Chair, I think in context, the automotive industry is an international industry whose value chains, whose OEMs are owned mainly internationally. In South Africa, we export about 68% of what is produced and assembled here. And the localization target sitting at 39%, and the master plan is projecting to increase that to 60% by 2035. Specific to the Eastern Cape, approximately 45% of the total light vehicle production of over 60,000 units annually comes from this province. So we are a significant player as a province in the production and export of vehicles. Developing localization in the auto sector requires a couple of things to happen, Chair. First of all, the factor cost profile, overheads, labor, material costs remain very high. And this is driving the cost base, which makes us as a region a little bit uncompetitive, as it were. Improving productivity in terms of quality and competitiveness of our suppliers. Remember, most of the decisions in the automotive industry are made internationally because companies that are producing here are based in Germany, US, Japan, and so on. So key decisions on quality, on competitiveness, key decisions on procurement are mainly done in those particular countries. Question is, how do we shape ourselves up here in South Africa, in our province here, to make sure that the organizations that are suppliers to the industry continue to produce quality products that are competitive as well. And the last issue, which is key, is to ensure that technology and skills availability are within what the industry requires. Otherwise, we continue seeing a lot of companies that are importing skills whenever new models are being introduced that are manufactured in our region. Chair, I mentioned this point earlier, that we're potentially the only region that has done this type of detailed work in terms of assessing the constraints, the challenges that are facing localization and transformation. And I guess it would be the same discussion point Mr. Memani will raise when he looks at other industries as well. What is it exactly that is facing our local industry or our local entrepreneurs that makes them not to be able to easily enter into the value chains? And we've got to be honest and real about our situation in the country so that we are able to shape ourselves and structure ourselves appropriately with the right instruments to support the entrepreneurs. So in conducting this research, we made contact with 128 suppliers in the Eastern Cape. I can tell the meeting now that there's just about 140 suppliers in total that are directly linked to supplying the OEMs and tier one entities. So we reached out to more than 80% of them. And so this is a very reliable outcome that we are very confident about. We put together a number of databases from a number of key stakeholders to arrive at this supplier base. There were specific interviews that were done with the tier one suppliers and the OEMs themselves, and direct face-to-face meetings that were conducted with some of the suppliers in interviews. So in context, again, Chair, we do find that if you look at the numbers, the local content levels of 39 to 40% account to about 70 billion rands, which is where we are sitting as the OEMs themselves. So OEMs are currently spending 70 billion rands on the 39% of the local content that they're getting. The tier one suppliers, which is a level just below the OEMs, currently spending about 62% on the sales in 2018 of local content. So the opportunities are huge. If you want to move that 60%, that 40% to 60% by 2035, you're talking another additional 20 to 30 billion rands on top of that 70. So there's large opportunities to expand manufacturing base. There's large opportunities to create employment. So these are the constraints directly, Chair, and this is the part that I would like us to spend a bit more time on. So one of the biggest challenges is that the small volumes. The small volumes that are, if you look at all the parts that are manufactured, the car itself takes about 3,000 parts to be properly put together. And if you want to localize, it's difficult to have one party or one supplier doing one part. The cost of investment just becomes too high. And that's one of the difficulties we need to find. We need to find a way, if we are going to localize, that local suppliers need to consolidate a few more parts. They need to scale themselves up to be able to manufacture more than two parts to justify the investment for them to enter the value chain. Number two is the high cost of tooling. For those who do not know, every time there's a new model, the old tools are done away with most of the time. And the investment that comes into the tooling and assembly lines is exactly covered. When you hear that Ford has put 15 billion rands investment, probably 12 billion rands of that is a completely new line with its tools. And that is a huge investment that only the OEM can make. So the question is, who then benefits from the remainder or the balance of that? And that's one of the reasons why it's big. If you look at the numbers of investment in terms of revenue, you potentially won't be able to localize 70% of that investment. It's got to come. It's an investment of the OEM themselves, and then the rest it goes to suppliers, and that's why then if you have 3,000 parts to put into a car, how many suppliers can you put together? How much investment can you put in one supplier? So the high cost of tooling is one of the biggest challenges that we're facing. And the mid-model changes is another challenge. Mercedes-Benz, for instance, keeps a model for 7 years. And after 7 years, a new procurement process starts, and South Africa must compete with other regions in the world, with Germany, Mercedes, to secure that particular model. We currently have the W206, which was launched about a week ago. Its lifespan goes up to 2028. And also, if you have to invest in a company that's supplying bumpers, you look at the volumes that are supplied there and the time frame it would take for you to pay back that investment, you'll find that it's short. So the issue for me, and I think for government, Mr. Memani himself, is how do we make sure that we secure as a country at least more than one model, which means more than one 7-year term. So we secure 15 years, 14 years term. So that if we invest in a company that Mr. Shimane is establishing to supply nuts and bolts to build a C-class, at least you have a 10 to 14-year contract as opposed to a 6 to 7-year contract. And that potentially might be able to assist you to attract the investment that you need to set up your own factory and to employ people in that factory. The different model launch dates, I've already made mention of that. In-house production costs. So most of the parts are produced in-house. So any business case to localize has got to be more aggressive. Because most of the cars we export, 68% of them we export to Europe, the issues of quality cannot be compromised. You haven't seen a lot of recalls from our OEMs based in the Eastern Cape, like you've heard from other car manufacturing companies. And that's because of the aggressive nature that the OEMs approach their business, and that they want to control pretty much most of what happens on the shop floor. So this is another constraint that we have to talk about and be real about, because the more vehicles that are being recalled, the more uncompetitive our region becomes. So it's a chicken and egg situation. It's a very tricky situation that we sit with. Technology is another challenge, the availability of, and I guess this would be of interest to PICA themselves. Technical capabilities inhibits the technology. You've got robots coming in now. You've got a lot of software work that is being used now. Electric vehicles are coming into the radar. Driverless vehicles are coming into the ladder. The question we must ask ourselves and be real about is what kind of skill are we producing as a region, as a country, that justifies that most of these technologies should not be imported from outside, so that we are relevant to these OEMs, we are relevant to these tier one suppliers, and we become a supplier of technology, we become a supplier of skill, relevant skill as it were. Safety critical testing cost is also another issue. Chair, we've just seen a release of the green paper on electric vehicles. And I don't think the country was ready for this until COVID hit. COVID has propelled everyone, has not only become a devastation to the lives of people, but it has compelled everyone to think 4IR very fast. So if we are to produce 68% of our cars for Europe, and Europe by 2025 is beginning to consume electric vehicles, it means we need to change course very fast as a region. Otherwise, we become uncompetitive. So if you start producing electric vehicles now, you need to have testing facilities so that when the vehicles are put on a ship, they are ready for Europe. You are not going to be able to produce cars here that have not been tested. The practical reality is that you see all the cars that are coming out of the shop. You see a car driving around with papers around it, and so that you don't see what car is it. They're testing the vehicle within the region, so that they are making it ready for the market. So the testing vehicles, testing costs are very high. And now that we're moving into the electric vehicle space, it means we need to invest locally, where the cars are manufactured, in the regions where the cars are manufactured, the proper testing facilities for electric vehicles. Supplier competitiveness, I've already made mention of that, the issue of quality and the cost of products that are coming out of the suppliers. This is also a very tricky subject when you want to empower a black supplier who's not been in the industry before, because you are dealing with with uncompromising quality issues. You are dealing with time issues, you're dealing with very low margins, unfortunately, which are imposed by the automotive industry onto their suppliers. Last challenge is the availability of local suppliers. This is mainly on raw material. We import most of our raw material, for instance, steel, in putting together all these cars. And it's a cost factor on its own. So these are the challenges that we have been able to gather from the 128 suppliers that we spoke to, the OEMs themselves, and the tier one suppliers. This is a real industry output or rather insight into us. This begins to tell us that we should ask ourselves a lot of questions as a country, as a region, on a state of readiness to localize. I don't think it will be different to other sectors, but I stand to be corrected. But these are the issues that will come up as we discuss the detail with the other sectors as well. This is probably a repeat, Chair, but more a graphical repeat. In terms of prioritization, the blockages, you can see technology is not number one, but global decision making is what is a key risk to us. Because the decisions are made, procurement decisions are made not here, but internationally, just by the fact that our industry is an export-based industry. Competitiveness, we've made mention of that. The global decision makers do not want to take chance, wouldn't want to take chance about who they want to be part of their supply chain. So they stick with the guys that they are used to. So the question is, how do we shape up to make sure that we sell our region, we sell our suppliers internationally, so that they are trusted to be part of the procurement networks? Tooling, we've mentioned, cost of testing, we've mentioned, and availability. I'm almost done, Chair. I think I've got one more slide to go. So the views expressed by the Eastern Cape-based OEMs, all of them reiterated the same constraints. But mainly, Eastern Cape in South Africa is perceived internationally as an area that's with low quality of raw materials, as I've mentioned. Very few skills that are required that we are able to supply, and hence we have a lot of import of skills. The barriers to entry for press material and laser welding are high, and they require huge capital investment. And that's what OEMs are saying. Specifically on black suppliers, the respondents were adamant that getting accurate information on existing black suppliers was a challenge. I know of VW who've run on many occasions, they've run workshops trying to secure black suppliers, but to no avail at the scale that we are looking at. There are some few black suppliers, but not at the scale we are looking at. But the industry is not only talking about these challenges, Chair, and saying, this is what you look like, South Africa. They actually put together a fund called the Automotive Industry Transformation Fund, about 6 billion rand. So all the OEMs are assisting our government to find a solution. And this fund is meant to support suppliers that are getting contracts from the same OEMs. But from our interactions with the fund, our interface with the industry, we do also realize that I think there's a gap that government needs to fill in terms of non-financial support, as it were. How do we help, Mr. Soba, our suppliers with non-financial support such that they remain competitive, such that the issues of quality are not compromised, such that their human resources are skilled? How do we package them on the soft issues, as it were, as opposed to be saying there is no money for us to be financed to set up our own factories? So all of this is an eye opener that we all have to be real about, that we all have to look into it and see what support as government we could put together to complement that which the automotive industry fund has been able to achieve so far. So it is a 6 billion rands fund. It had recently started doing its deals. I think they've done about 4 to date, but there's scope to improve. I think from government, we also need to find a way to come closer to the industry and find joint solutions so that we can move the issue of localization forward. Those are my slides, Chair, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Khabo Shengane. We really appreciate the insight and the input. For me, it's a foreign industry, but I understand the models that OEMs use from even in the IT sector. They obviously want to maintain the autonomy in terms of decision making. Sorry, I think I'm echoing. I joined with 2 devices because I keep getting dropped off. My apologies for that. And it's encouraging to also see that there is effort made by government in terms of assisting from a local point of view. I think we will park this and we will engage Mr. Skosana if you are not back to join the panel later on with further questions that may be coming through from the panel. I'd like to now move on to, and thank you so much, we appreciate your input.
Thank you,
I'd like to now move on
Miss
to
Skosana, by the way.
Mr. Don Mashele, who's the Head of Development Impact Support at CIFA. Mr. Don Mashele, please join us and let's hear from you. In the interest of time, I think we're running about 10 minutes behind. We'll try and catch up on time as well as we go through, but I think it's important that we go through most of the content. If we're not able to address questions in the end, we will take them down and get all the participants to respond back to anyone who raises a question. Thank you.
Thanks, Chairperson. Am I audible?
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much.
And we can see your slides.
Thank you. I'll be quick. And thanks for the opportunity to present CIFA's offering. And as said, my name is Don Mashele. I'm with CIFA in Centurion, our head office. So, I mean, from the presentation and the intention of the webinar today, which is localization, one of the things that really will be critical by way of support is funding. I know towards the end, Tao did mention that there's a fund that is looking at the industry, the automotive industry, but as a Department of Small Business Development Agency, we have got funding that supports businesses across board. So let me just contextualize. I'm sure you do know that we are an implementing agency of the Department of Small Business Development. My colleague, Mr. Meman, will be presenting after me. Our mandate at CIFA is to provide funding. Alongside CIFA, we've got our sister agency that provides business development support, which in itself is very, very critical, as Tabo was saying, that we do need capacity to support the small businesses. So it's not just the funding, but it's the funding with support. So as a portfolio, that's what we do. Quickly, I won't talk about all the programs that we have at CIFA because it's gonna be time consuming, but I'm gonna just focus on the programs that are targeted at supporting SMMEs and cooperatives to drive localization amongst others. So as a CIFA, we've got 2 channels, the channels that we use to on-lend to the sector. We've got a direct lending channel where we lend directly. We've got a wholesale channel where we partner with intermediaries. And these are the intermediaries that have got programs to on-lend to small businesses. Now, under direct lending, we only provide debt funding. We provide asset finance. We provide bridging loans. Some of our clients have got contracts. We do assist them with bridging loans. We provide term loans. The minimum that we do is through direct lending, it's 50,000, and the maximum is 15 million. Under wholesale, like I said, we partner with intermediaries that are in the business of on-lending to small businesses. The fund that, or the program that we'd like to share this afternoon is the one that is targeted at businesses that are in the manufacturing space. because when you think localization, it's about value addition, it's about beneficiation, it's about manufacturing. So we've got a special scheme called the Small Enterprise Manufacturing Support Program. Now, through this program, we are able to provide funding to enterprises to acquire machinery or equipment and also working capital. We can also fund product accreditation, certification, and testing. But I must add to say that the last part, which is product accreditation, certification, and testing, we can't fund that as a standalone. We fund that as part of the package. So if you're in a business and you're saying you saw the opportunities that were presented by the previous speaker, and we are in that sector, as it were, taking advantage of some of the value chain opportunities, we can assist in setting up or assisting businesses in terms of the machinery, the equipment required, part of the working capital, and also the accreditation, like I said. The maximum that we provide is 50 million rands. We don't do anything above that, but to understand that as government, there are other agencies that can pick up from where we leave off. So our mandate is up to 15 million rand. Anything above that will have to be entertained by the likes of your NEFs or your IDCs, as an example. And the repayment period, because here we're talking about facilities, that big facilities, as it were, we're looking at about 84 months. We can also provide moratorium, which is interest and capital holiday, up to 6 months. The beauty about this instrument is that it's a blended finance instrument, blended in the manner that says we provide a combination of a loan and a grant in one package. So we are able to provide up to 20% of the loan amount by way of a grant, which is not repayable. And this is very much important because it assists the business in terms of issues around equity and contribution, where you don't gear these businesses and they cannot afford the loan that we do provide. So that is the one beauty about that. It's a blended finance instrument, and the interest rate is a flat rate of prime that we do charge. So we don't price for risk to say to be prime plus the margin of risk. It's just prime flat interest rate that we charge through this instrument. Who is eligible to apply? That is the list. It must be a registered entity, and the business has to be owned 100% by a South African citizen. And the business must at least be in operation for 2 years, 51% black owned and 51% black managed, be in good standing in terms of the receiver, and it must register on the SMME-SA database. And I'm sure Mr. Memani, my colleague, will talk more about that, the advantages of registering on that database. The requirements, because remember now, we're a lending institution. Now there are certain things that we need to check before we can provide funding. One of the things that we have to check is the issues around affordability. As you know, as a lender, we have to provide support, but we have to operate within the ambits of the National Credit Act, governed by the regulator. So one of the things that we need to check is affordability. So when you look at the list of documents that we do require, they are addressing two things. One is the issue of affordability, to say you cannot provide a loan to a business that can't afford a loan. It's an illegal act to do that. Number two is the issue of knowing your client. We need to make sure that you do a proper assessment and you understand exactly who's your borrower, who are you providing funding to. So when you look at that list in terms of why we require this document, amongst other things, is to address those two key issues. The issue of, we no longer request business plans, as it were, because what we have done is we have put together, when I say we, I'm talking about SEDA, ourselves, the IDC and the NEF, and we did engage with NYDA to a point where we put together what we call a common funding template. Because the challenge is this: if we say to someone, applicants must give you a business plan, there are so many templates of business plans out there. We have instances where you get a business plan done by our sister organization, SEDA. It comes to us, for instance, it still have gaps, doesn't tick all boxes. So what we have done is we set together with CEDA, CIFA, IDC, and the NEF, and developed what we call a common funding template. So these are the sections of that common funding template, such that we don't send applicants from pillar to post. So in terms of what we require in the template, number one is about the company information. We need to know that company. Number two is about the shareholders, the people or the shareholders behind that business. We need that information. The structure of the company, the operations of the business, very crucial now when you talk about localization, because here you're talking about businesses that are in the manufacturing space, amongst other things. The products that you will be manufacturing or the services that you'll be rendering. And also you need to understand your space. You know, if you, for instance, are in the automotive space, you need to understand that space. Who's your target market, and your strategy. What strategy or which strategies are you going to employ to penetrate your target market? How are you going to generate the sales? Number 7, we're also saying when you give us a pitch or a funding proposal, you must understand your competition. Who are your competitors? I mean, there's no business out there that is it's a monopoly. You've got competition, and then you have to tell us how are you different from your competitors. And it must be a sustainable competitive edge. The location of the business is very crucial for a number of reasons, which I won't mention, but it's crucial that you strategically locate your business where it will make sense to proximity to customers, proximity to suppliers, amongst other things. Your external environment in terms of political, economic, social, technological environment, as well as legal. You need to understand those things. When things change politically, economically, social, and so on and so on, what implications those things have in your business. I mean, COVID has taught us that there is no business that can say it's not impacted by technology. So it was just a fast learning curve for everybody, but also politics, the economy, the social environment, etc., has got an impact in your business. The funding requirements, I said, our limit is 50 million rands, but when you ask for 10 million as an example, you must have done research, you must tell us exactly how you're going to use the money. Your financial model in terms of your financial statements, if it's an existing business, and your cash flow projections going forward. You need to give us those things. And we need well-motivated cash flow projections, because you need to give us assumptions. If you're saying that I'll be making 200,000 per month or per annum, whatever the case is, it must be a well-motivated assumption or projection that banking information, you need to tell us about that. Supply information, I think Tabo in his presentation, he did mention the importance of suppliers in that sector. And I think it's not unique to the automotive. Where you are in business and you've got suppliers, you just make sure that the suppliers that you have, they themselves are reliable and sustainable. Your staff, the people working for you, we need to unpack that. Compliance environment, I can't overemphasize this. And that is where our sister organization assists some of the businesses in terms of compliance, etc. And last but not least is the SWOT analysis. So this is the funding template, which has been digitized, by the way. So you can log on the CIFA website. You will have to go to a tab that says apply for finance, and you go under common application template. It will ask you quiz questions. As and when you respond to the questions, it will in the background build this funding template, which is a Word document which you can download, edit the manner in which you like. If you feel that it's good enough to use as one of the supporting documents in your application pack, then you submit that to any of the lenders. It can be IDC, it can be NEF or CIFA. However, I must emphasize, this is not an application form, it just substitute in a way what we used to require, which is a business plan. If you feel you need assistance with this, you can approach any of the CEDA regional offices. They'll be able to assist you. So that is that. I won't talk in the interest of time. I won't go into detail in terms of the programs that we have targeted at township. Mr. Namani, if he's got time, maybe can just unpack that depending on how the program goes. Because we've got programs that we have developed. When I say we, talking about the DSBD portfolio, DSBD Seed and CIFA, called Township and Rural Enterprise Program. So these are blended finance programs targeted at township and rural areas, where we provide a combination of a loan and a grant. Most programs, we providing funding up to 350,000, of which 50,000 of that can be a grant. Some of them, they did. We've got a sponsorship support program, which has got a different threshold. We've got the other one that's targeted at the automotive sector. Also, that has got a different threshold. So I won't go through each one of them. But I just wanted to share the principle behind these programs, because how are they relevant to the issue of localization? Because now, if you have strong small businesses at the retail level, let's take, for argument's sake, the sponsorship support program or the clothing and textile. If you've got strong small businesses out there that are operating, it's easier to integrate backward. And then say, if you've got a cohort of sponsorships that are sustainable in their own right, it becomes easier to start manufacturing some of the products that can be sold through those particular sponsorships. So I'm saying that in terms of the trade programs, we also need to look at them in that light. So the overall objective is to get that part of the value chain to be strong. As we backward integrate, then we can start putting factories, or we can start putting factories where we can support these businesses. And that is one way of localizing in the rural areas and the township. So Chairperson, I think I'll end there. Our contact details, our website, and everything else. We'll share the presentation in the interest of time. Let me pause here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Don Mashele. I appreciate the presentation. Mr. Mdwaba, I see your hand is up, but I wouldn't want us to finish the session without having gone through Mr. Mzwanele Memane's presentation. Can we park your question, or please post it on the chat, and maybe Mr. Don Mashele can respond to it in the meantime there. And then we move on to the next speaker. Mr. Don Mashele is the Director Value Chain Support for Development for the Department of Small Business Development. He's going to cover the market value chains in the Department of Small Business Development. Over to you, Mr. Mzwanele.
Thank you, Chairperson, for the introduction, and good afternoon to all the participants. So a quick one for us, Chairperson, is that we worked on a policy framework which the Cabinet mandated us last year to focus on. You will remember that for many years, the industrial policy in South Africa was driven largely by big companies. And so hence it is very difficult. And I think the constraints Mr. Shangane highlighted just in the automotive sector, that most of the suppliers are well established, they are well known. So that has been a long trend. But I think since last year, we then focused on this policy framework so that small companies can drive the issue of product producing in the country. And this piece of work became part of the economic recovery plan, which the president announced last year. So these are some of the objectives that are part of that framework. One is to build the manufacturing capacity of SMMEs. And I think research tells us more SMMEs are not necessarily in the manufacturing sector. So you will find SMMEs in all the other sectors like retail, wholesale, services sector, and others. So we really want to encourage small companies to focus on this sector because it is very critical. In fact, lessons we've learned from China is that China spent an awful amount of resources just on building the capacity of Chinese companies to manufacture products. So that's why when you go to any store, 9 out of 10, the product you pick up is likely to be made not in South Africa. So the second aspect for us is then to target specific goods that we import and make sure we build the capacity of SMMEs to produce such goods. Then thirdly, this will make it easier for us to link these SMMEs to the markets. Really, that's the bottom line. All SMMEs, or in fact, every enterprise, in order to survive, it has to have a market. So it doesn't matter how competitive you are, but if you don't access markets, you're not gonna make money. And if they can flood the domestic market, it's gonna be easier for us to support these SMMEs towards the export market. We can start with the SADC region, our neighbors, and then expand it to the rest of the African continent. And I think we know some SMMEs that are already selling their products to the neighboring countries, and others are extending. Issue of skills, Chair, I want to emphasize innovation and digitization. Those initiatives are very key. And lastly, funding. And I think my colleague Don touched on funding. So what are some of the principles for this piece of legislation? The bias, Chair, is to accelerate the manufacturing sector in township and in rural communities, because that's where the need is. And it's not easy because of the structure of our economy, because of the historical imbalances. If you look at rural communities, the infrastructure doesn't exist to start with. So no wonder Mr. Thabo Sengane is struggling to get black suppliers in the Eastern Cape, who can be recruited from rural communities, precisely because the infrastructure is bad. And so what do we need to do? I think all of us as stakeholders, we can work together to support these enterprises. And light and fast consumer goods, maybe that's a starting point for us, because these are goods that consumers consume on a daily basis. And some are technical in the high demand, minerals, beneficiation, but I think we need SMMEs even in those spaces. And it's going to be important, therefore, Chair, for us to work together. So these are some of the sectors or subsectors that we have selected to focus on. It doesn't mean we are closing any other sector or subsector, but we just want to be focused for the next 4 years. So at least by 2024, we would like to see more and more SMMEs at least participating on these sectors. Some of them are easier sectors to enter. Some of the subsectors are not easier because of the high barriers to entry. And Mr. Sengane mentioned the issue of steel as an example. So if some SMMEs are manufacturing components for the automotive industry, we know it's not going to be easy, but I think let's bite the bullet and do it and support SMMEs that have an interest of entering that subsector. So there's just 4 pillars, Chair, I'm going to highlight. One pillar is import dependency. You will be surprised to note that virtually all the products you have in your refrigerator, in your cupboard, 99% of them are not manufactured in South Africa. So COVID really helped us, because even toothpicks, we import them. Earbuds, we import. You look at vegetables, you buy at Spar, avocado, we import. I can tell you the countries where we import the food you eat. So I think that analysis we did on import and exports really gave us an idea that in South Africa, we've been importing a lot of products, thanks to COVID, on the other hand. On the other hand, okay, it's not a good thing that it's devastating societies. But when we look at the structure of the economy, you may have seen, Chair, the release of the trade account that we went on a trade surplus. Why? It's because we were not longer importing, because now we are building that manufacturing base. So at least there is a scheme, Chair, that we have, and I think Mr. Don Mashele spoke to that scheme, so that whoever has an interest of getting into manufacturing, and they need support, we can support them. And the second pillar is private sector value chains. So it's important for us to do linkages, link small businesses with big businesses. And so from last year, we started the intense discussions with all the retailers in the country, as well as the wholesalers, so that they can open up their shelf space for SMMEs, because honestly, it's part of our transformation agenda as government to make sure that the products that are on the shelves, some of those products are produced by small companies. So just some achievements. Last year, we started off with just 36 SMMEs. And so you can see the geographic spread. It's still not a lot of companies, but at least it's a start. And our target was at least to list 200 products or facilitate linkages of 200 products to be on the shelves. And by end of March 2021, at least we managed to have a success of 238 products listed by major retailers. And these are some of the products, and I'm sure some of you, as you visit Clicks, as you visit Discam, Spar, Pick and Pay, Massmart, you're gonna find now products manufactured by small companies on the shelves of these retailers. And so we want to continue that conversation with big businesses to open up opportunities for small companies. The third pillar is government, public sector procurement. Government also needs to consider small companies. It's unfortunate that the Preferential Procurement Act we have only focuses on the issue of value for money. As a result, if you are a small company with no financial muscles, you compete with companies in a tender, you will obviously not win that tender, because those who are issuing the tender will often look at the lowest quote. So what we're proposing as the department is to have products that are designated only to be procured from SMMEs. So that's a conversation we are having, and we believe it's going to transform this work that we are doing, that even government should start to procure from small companies. And then the last pillar, Chair, is township and rural enterprises. This is an area that has been neglected. Hence, we are kicking off with supporting all the businesses that are in the townships. Some of them are very informal, but the idea is we want to upgrade them so that they can graduate and become viable businesses. I think Dawn was correct. The idea is there's linkages between manufacturing and all these other industries, so that in essence, the space of retail and wholesale, what we want to gradually see is local people starting to take ownership of that space. Pop-up markets, so we can showcase some of the products and services that SMMEs produce. And I think CEDA here is doing a brilliant job. You may have noticed all the, across the country, what CEDA is doing to make sure we showcase products manufactured by SMMEs. We know people are so used to well-established brands, but I think, Chair, all of us need to change that paradigm and change that mindset and embrace these brands that are coming from SMMEs. A district development model, it's a new model that the president launched last year. So this one really is for us to work together as government, just avoid the silos so that we can work together. It really promotes joint planning. Let me conclude, Chair, with a list of 1,000 products and services which we published early this year. I'll urge all the participants to visit our website and they can download this list. This is just a high-level breakdown of that list of 1,000 products. The idea here, Chair, it was based on research, analysis of imports and exports. What are we importing? What is it that we can do locally? And then secondly, we also get market intelligence from the big retailers we are negotiating with on a monthly basis, and they give us ideas that specific products are in high demand. As an example, the products that I've highlighted are in high demand. I mean, if you can find SMMEs that manufacture small appliances like a kettle, iron, hair dryer, toaster, just tell me, Chair, this afternoon, we're going to negotiate for those SMMEs to find space in major retailers, because we are importing all these products. And so if we can produce them locally, Chair, we are creating jobs in the country. People don't realize that when we buy imports, we are actually promoting jobs in another country. So we need to change that attitude of embracing things that are not produced in the country. So if we don't have capability, what we're doing, working with SEDA, is also to set up incubators where people can be trained to manufacture those particular products. So these are some of the quick wins, Chair, from some of the big companies we're working with. If we can find small companies that manufacture these products, definitely we can do the linkages and facilitate. So, Chair, I think we identify a number of players that can assist us in building or deepening the industrial base. And I think PICTA is one of those institutions, because you have members, you host workshops. So I'm sure when you come across small companies that are into manufacturing, together with PICTA, I'm sure we can change this world. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mzanele Memani. I appreciate the amount of effort that the department has done. And for me as a citizen, what I've learned today is that there is really a lot of effort that is being made, and there are opportunities for us to actually engage. I think 1,000 is a great achievement, but 1 million would be a great milestone. But we'll shoot for 100,000 in the next 4 years. At least we'll land somewhere. I'd like to firstly just ask our participants and apologize that in the interest of time, we will not be able to have the panel. I think I kind of preempted that when you started presenting. We have one last presenter that we would like to ask to present. We will set up a panel if our panel agrees to that. We will set up a panel discussion to follow up this discussion. Today, and the questions, I'd like to also employ all your questions in there. We will note them and we'll make sure that we do respond to them, and we will schedule a follow-up session where we can engage in a live conversation where we discuss some of the questions that you may have posed and some that we came to the session with, and allow you as well as participants to ask questions. So I would also like to ask for at least 10 minutes of your time to allow Funzani Mthembu to please then take us through her presentation. She's a development economist representing the Eastern Cape Socio-Economic Consultative Council. Funzani, please take over and go through your presentation. I do apologize that your presentation will be rushed, but I hope that we will still have our participants in the room to listen to your presentation. Thank you. Hi, Funzani.
No, we can't see you moving.
Funzani, are you, Rufara, is Funzani still in the call? I see she is on the call, but
I think
we
she's
can't see
having
this.
internet issues.
She says she's on call, but it looks like a laptop is has decided to freeze.
Okay. Can we please just give her a minute maybe to try and
I
see if she
think-
can?
Yes, through you, Chair. Thank you. I think let's do the last part before her. The way forward from here, you've indicated and asked people, the panelists or the speakers, to make themselves available for the next round of basically panel engagement with the communities.
Hmm.
I in support of your suggestion, I would like the panelists or the speakers to indicate and advise either myself or Utatu Soga that they will be available and we can plan accordingly. As PICTA, we're not working alone, we're working with CEDA Eastern Cape. And we would like them to indicate so that we must set up a date and they can come back and we can take over from where they're leaving off or left off today.
Thank you, Sonwabo. I think this is very much packed in terms of information. That session will be very ideal. Let's probably look in terms of what questions come up and all of that, and then we can have that special sort of session to follow up on this. But I want to emphasize that this is just the first on a range of other webinars that we'll do on key topics for the province. So this is not the only one. We're going to have a number of other topics, but I think very important that we can look in terms of this topic, which is very, very vital, and then probably have a follow-up in terms of the questions that come up, and then we can be able to look at them, and if need be, we can be able then to engage the panelists, and then let sort of the people be able to talk directly to the panelists and have a discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Soka.
Thank you, Mr. Soga.
Chair, just to highlight, I see she's not back yet. One of the things that we need to look at as we go forward, we've, as PICTA and CEDA Eastern Cape, we've agreed that we're going to have a series of 5 webinars focusing on localization for the Eastern Cape. There are some government structures that are going to be invited for the next topics. Maybe in the next panel discussion, we might add on maybe one Tatu Soga will guide as the key stakeholder. But there's issues like import substitution versus localization. Utatu Memani has highlighted that they've got 1,000 products that they are pushing right now. Does that mean import substitution is loosely utilized by people who are not progressive or subjective, who are anti-localization? We need to look at those things and say, as South Africans, as South Africa or Eastern Cape, we are looking at building our economies and building capacity and competency for us to take the center stage and be highly competitive without shutting or closing out the international world. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I see we don't have Usis Funzani back on the call.
Can I come
I
in?
suppose
Chair?
based on the remarks that you've made, Mr. Sonwabo Mdwaba, and the remarks that you've made also, Mr. Siphiwe Soga, I think if we are in a position to really sit and put together a session where we debrief and we introduce the other 2 departments that were not able, one that was not able to speak today, but the other one that Mr. Mdwaba is also mentioning, we'll start there and then we'll open up at least for an hour to have the conversation. It's in my view, and I guess in everyone's view, it is important for us to unpack these matters to look at whether are they reaching the grassroots level, the people that need to learn, to know that these programs exist and they are available to them. There are barriers. Someone will say 2 years to entry. There are barriers to entry. How do we supplement and augment and help people to get into those environments? How do we access the funding that is made available? Beyond that, there's education and training in terms of getting the youth, women-owned entities involved that is available to the community. How do we take that to our communities? We've seen how the digital platform has enabled us to actually thoroughly engage. I'm in Joburg, Pretoria, Rufaro is in Randburg, Mr. Mdwaba is in the Eastern Cape, but we are engaging live in these sessions. There is obviously that issue of a digital divide where people don't have access to technology that whom we wish to reach. But how do we then extend? Because we are also seeing programs where Wi-Fi is being extended to local communities, local schools, and the community at large can actually now get access to platforms. I think for me is forward to the follow-up available and for us as the community to learn how do we enter the space and how do we move forward. I'd like to firstly extend a word of gratitude to all the panelists who participated. Mr. Soga, thank you for also assisting us with making sure that we pull in the right teams for these discussions. I'd like to acknowledge CEDA as one of our partners and say thank you again for really helping us and joining hands and joining forces with us to bring this to the community at large. And I'd like to extend a word of gratitude to Oracle for allowing and enabling us and giving us the platform to facilitate this. And the participants, most importantly, this is mainly to have a conversation with you. We have seen a number of questions that have come through. And some of them have been answered. I think 2 have been answered. One question from Nomtanda Zombande is open. We have your details. We will respond to that questions, and please look out for an invite from PACTA. We obviously will be sending the POPI Act email to allow us to continue to engage as we continue to engage. I see there's something that's also come in from the chat. Given that all 3, so Yamkele, we will look at your question and get it answered as soon as possible. But I think at this point in time, we've hit 3 minutes, we're 3 minutes over the time that was allocated for this session, and we don't want to keep you unnecessarily in this chat. A safe and a great afternoon. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much to everybody. Thank you, Don. Thank you, Mzee. Thank you, Smiley. Thank you, Shangani, and all the best for everybody. Thanks.
Thank you, colleague.
Thank you, Babu Mashele. Thank you, Babu Memani. Thank you. Thank you very much. Babu Memani, the next round.